Welcome back to another episode of What Should I Get Pierced? You guys have been sending me your pictures, and I am going to go over your pictures and tell you what I think would possibly look best on you. Now, before you miss any other future content, make sure to give me that like, subscribe, and of course, if you enjoyed it, share it with your friends. Now, let's move on to the first person. The first person we're looking at here is Bent. Now, Bent has an amazing upper lip. This upper lip, you can see how those two lines going right down the center says Philtrum or Medusa piercing. Now, another fun option would be a Gestrum, because that's still in the same area and that kind of pulls it off your teeth if you wanted something to be outside of your mouth. But definitely a Gestrum or a Medusa. Now, I could also see a nostril piercing. For some reason, I see a single nostril piercing, not the double nostril piercing, so that would kind of tie up in that one area, and I don't really see a lot more. Maybe if she was interested, we could go with something like a tongue piercing or a tongue web on the inside, but we can't see that and see if they're the right candidate. But that's always another option that we don't always see. But let's move on to her ear. Now, immediately looking at this industrial bar, it's pretty epic. You got this giant serpent or snake. Now, my first concern is if you were looking to get in something like this yourself, is if that snake going on the back side of the bar is digging into their ear. Now, here in the picture, it really doesn't look like it, so it's probably totally fine. The only thing I would say is maybe shorten up the industrial bar so it doesn't move around as much. Sometimes these serpents or inner charms, we should say, that go on the inside are held on by a little O-ring, or sometimes they're removable. If that's the case, shorten up the bar. And then if you also shortened up the bar, you could always anodize that bar, and having the colored bar behind it might be pretty epic. Now, as far as new piercings go, first thing I see is going to be the doth piercing. With the doth piercing, it's going to be far enough away from the industrial bar where you're not taken away, and it's only going to accentuate. Now, looking at the tragus and anti-tragus, they're probably too small to get pierced. You might be able to get away with a small stud in the tragus, but personally, I think the doth would look really, really good. Now, let's look at her other ear. Now, with something like this, I'm seeing the flat area, possibly a double or a triple. It would look really nice, and it doesn't give you the option for rings, but it gives you a lot of options for a lot of the bigger gems or designs. And of course, if you want to do a doth on both sides, that leaves the inside here. Or if you want to do a little bit different, maybe do a conch piercing, and when it's healed up, do the ring going around the conch. That would look pretty rad. So that kind of ties it up here with Bent. And up next, we have a newlywed couple who sent in their pictures from Uruguay. We have Hamina and Victor. But first, we're talking about Hamina. Now, looking at her septum, she's got a septum piercing, a tight little ring in there. I like that. The only thing I would possibly change is if you wanted to go something fancier or if you wanted to add some color to that. But with this, I see a vertical lip piercing, which ties in real nicely with the septum, and possibly an eyebrow piercing. Now, other than that, I would say let's keep this one a little bit more simple. The vertical lip piercing, the nostril piercing, and of course, you could always do that second nostril piercing if you wanted to as well. And what I mean by that is the second on the same side. I personally see it on her left side, our right side. And let's move on to her ears. Now, her ears, the first ear we're looking at is, of course, naked, and that tragus is protruding perfectly where we could put a stud or a nice little ring in there. Now, if you wanted that little ring, make sure it heals all the way up and then change to the ring, but I would start off with a stud. Also, looking at her doth piercing would be very, very nice because it's not too thick. And it looks like the rook would be a good option too if you wanted to go. They might be kind of close together, so it might be the rook or the doth. I would say probably go with the doth in this situation. And it's hard to tell from the angle of the piercing. A snug might be an option for her, but snugs are rough heels and you gotta have the right anatomy for it, so I'd want to see a slightly different angle. And of course, you could always tie this up with a couple helixes going down the side of the ear, which just brings everything out a little bit more. Awesome, awesome. Now let's look at her other ear. Now on the other ear, you can see the snug a little bit better, and here the snug looks like it's probably a little too thick. I would probably steer away from that. And again, this just really reaffirms the doth piercing. That looks like it needs to be pierced. And her tragus, both ears are fairly symmetrical. Both ears could work really well. Just depends on the combination of jewelry you wanted to go with. Now, if you were doing the doth on the other ear, you can see here that the rook would be really cool. So if you wanted to change it up a little bit, rook on this side, doth on the other, and you can kind of balance things up with some more helix piercings on the side. That is a nice little combo. And last thing I do want to point out is let's take a look at her earlobe piercing. I hate always pointing out little problems, but it looks like you're seeing some redness and some irritation here. Now, if this is a segment ring, a ring with no beads where there's a little tiny seam or a gap, if that's getting in the middle, that could be moving and causing the irritation. If you have irritation like this, a lot of times just switch to a stud that's not going to move around, and a lot of times that will solve up any of your problems. But let's move on to her newlywed husband. And looking right away here at Victor, we were seeing glasses. The glasses kind of eliminate a lot of the options as far as like a bridge or a high nostril. But if you wanted to do double nostril piercings on here, that would look super, super cool. And you can see how his upper philtrum as well is, the hair doesn't grow there as well. So let's accentuate that area. If the hair's not going to cover it up, we could put a really big gem right inside there. And of course, if you're into the lip piercings, I see snake bites. Snake bites are the way the hair goes. We'll kind of put it on this side to kind of accentuate the way the hair flows towards it. And that would be really cool. Now, the thing is when you have a beard, shaving around that area is really, really tough. So it doesn't look like the hair grows in that area, or he's a really, really good shaver. But if the hair doesn't grow in that area, that does make facial piercings with facial hair a lot easier. But let's look on to his ear. The first ear we're looking at, I'm seeing a tragus piercing, but I see two tragus piercings. It doesn't stand out a lot, but it's a longer tragus. So if we put two studs in there, I would like to do something like that. And of course, his earlobes are pretty naked. Let's put a couple studs in the earlobes. I see two here and possibly one up top in the helix. Now, I love doing rook piercings, and I'm kind of on a rook kick lately, but I don't think he would have the right anatomy for a rook. Now, if you were to do a rook in a situation like this, the angle is going to be a little bit different, which makes it a little bit rougher of a heel. But once it heals, something like this, a ring, would look really tight and snug around in that area. Not everyone can get away with the ring in the same situation. It's because of the angle, the way it points down. So if you want to go through that heel, heal it up with the bar, and change it up to the rook in the future, go for that. Now let's look at his other ear. His other ear, again, you can see exactly what I'm talking about with the rook, how it just kind of folds down. Once it's healed, put that ring in there. Looking at this tragus, it looks like the bottom protrudes a little bit more, so maybe the double wouldn't work as well over here. Probably better on the other side. But here, the helix going all the way down, you see that nice fold. I say let's decorate the helix, the doff, and of course match up that lobe to the other side. Awesome, awesome pictures. Thanks for sending those in, and congratulations on being newlyweds. And let's move on to the next person, who is Ayana. Looking at Ayana, I want to say first things first is going to be an eyebrow piercing. Everything kind of draws me towards her eyes, so an eyebrow piercing, and I like the symmetry, the way her hair's parted on both sides. Symmetrical barbells up there would look really, really nice. And also, angel bites. I don't talk a lot of different bites in the situation, but angel bites on both sides, the eyebrow piercings, I think that would look really, really cool. And of course, with a symmetrical nose like this, a nice tight septum ring would look really, really cute as well. Let's look at her ears. Now, right away with the ears, you can see how the helix, the skin is kind of folded over, which doesn't give a lot of room for studs. They don't sit in there very naturally. But if you could heal it up with a stud, change it to the ring. The rings look really nice on this fold of the ear on the helix. Now, also, I would say a conch piercing. The conch is a larger area. You could fit that nice cluster in there. And if you wanted to, you could even do a double conch and maybe do a double ring in the future. Also looking onto her tragus. The tragus does protrude, which means a nice stud would fit in there really, really well. Another thing I'd just like to mention is if I'm ever talking tragus piercings or doth piercings, keep in mind that if you're wearing earbuds, stethoscopes, things that go in your ear, that will cause problems. You do need to avoid those types of things. Just a little added bonus tip for you. But a tragus piercing would look super, super cute. And for looking at that earlobe, there's a hole there, but there's no jewelry. So let's put some jewelry in there and start stretching it. Why not? Let's get some plugs in there. You put some beautiful stones. There's lots of cool options with stretched ears. So again, people, start stretching your ears. Just take your time, and that gives you lots of options for cool, cool jewelry. And that pretty much concludes it today. The 4 people we went over, that's a lot of piercings they could get and a lot of options. What do you think? Was I right about my predictions? Let me know in the comments below. And of course, if you wanted to be featured on one of these videos, all you need to do is send me in 2 pictures, 3 if you want to get both sides of your ears. And when you send it to me, make sure to send it to piercingwithscott@gmail.com, listed right here. And I will try to get you in the near future. We have lots of pictures to go through, so I'm going to keep putting these videos out. And of course, like I said, give me a like, subscribe, and keep putting holes in your body. We'll see you all in the next video.